I am Tony Russo, and this is on Deathcare. This week we are speaking with Lindsay Granson. She is the Chief Operating Officer for Heritage Family. We've got a bunch of really cool stuff that we eventually get into, but we start off just talking about a recent kind of coup they had where they got a front page mention, not front page mention, they got their whole business on the front page and their entire, press release into the newspaper for a big event that they had coming up. The big event was a grand reopening of a business that had been rebranded. Now, one of the things that Heritage kind of presents itself as a company that doesn't necessarily change the name of the business. They try to keep the culture and the name as best as they can. In this case, it wasn't possible for lots of interesting reasons that we'll get into, and I will have more to say at the end in the post-credit sequence, I guess. I'll talk a little bit about the controversy surrounding this particular building. Hey folks, Future Tony here, popping in after the edit. I realize that it might be irritating to not know the specific name of the politician we are talking about. Again, I'll get to the rest of it at the end of the episode, but the politician / former funeral home owner's name is Brent Taylor, if you want to Google him. But what we really get into is how a company like Heritage can kind of literally consolidate their operations, which is what they've been up to for the last couple years or so, and then look to move forward under this new program. So that was a really exciting thing. The other thing we chat about toward the end is how desperately do consolidators or even other funeral homes want to buy the buildings anymore, and is tomorrow is promised to no one, I guess, but is the future of funeral homes, or is there some more hybrid-y thing that could be considered? And I've spoken before about my belief that there is going to be more funeral businesses than funeral homes in the future. And so that wasn't something that Lindsay necessarily disagreed with. And we get into that toward the end. But enough from me. Just remember, thank you as always to my paid subscribers who are sponsoring this show and all of my work. If you'd like to become a subscriber at any level, including the free level, I would love it if you visited on deathcare.com and subscribed. You can get this show, you can get the other shows that I do, and of course my weekly reporting on Deathcare. But enough from me. Let's hand it over to Lindsay. So one of the things that I'm really interested in all the time is how funeral homes get good earned media, get positive mentions, get kind of shown out front. And Joe Weigel sent me an email a couple of weeks ago where he told me that this company got a good mention, and I wanted to start to talk about that. So for starters, let's talk about your decision to rebrand this particular funeral home, because you also moved it, right? It got moved and rebranded.
Right. It was moved ahead of this particular executive team being here, but yes, they put it in a new building in Collierville.
Part of the moving was to add stuff, to add a celebration of life and that kind of.
Yeah, I believe, and I had not seen the prior building, right? I wasn't here then, but I believe this was a much larger building in a much better location, from what I understand.
So when you came on into the middle of this transition. So what was that like to have to pick up somebody else's kind of plan, and then execute it?
Yeah. So, I think a couple of things. The company had doubled in size between about 2020 and 2022-ish. So we had a lot of different buildings in a lot of different places that were still kind of running like their own little, I call them their own little countries, but they were still kind of running the way they were running before they had become part of the Heritage family. So part of us getting here was figuring out how to kind of get everybody aligned on the same systems, the same plans. And so, Brent Taylor and that group was just one part of a really big project to do that. So, one of the things the company hadn't really done is holistic digital marketing. So, the reason Brent Taylor came up as one of the first rebrands I was thinking about doing is because Brent Taylor funeral directors is just a tough thing to come up well in a Google search,
Uh,
especially if you're not putting the whole thing in. If Mr. Taylor is a state senator, so if you're just typing in Brent Taylor, you're going to get his personal stuff. So it was really hard to media buy to get that where it needed to be in the funeral space. So that was the initial reason we were going to rebrand. It just made sense for us. So that's where we started, because historically, I like to keep the funeral homes, their names, their local names. That's what the town knows and understands and what they've been using. So even if the former owners were not connected to us in any way, we typically will keep the local name unless there's a reason not to. And in
and
this case, that was the first reason.
right. It's kind of a weird balance to try and strike, because you're trying to keep as much as possible rather, the same at the property, but also to add in different efficiencies. The accounting and
Yes.
everything, that's fine. But as you said, like the software and things like that, where do you find the biggest kind of hiccups in that integration process? Especially, so how many do you remember how many funeral homes you had to kind of onboard once you came on?
So we have almost 100 funeral homes, and there were pockets. They were all operating on different systems. So different websites, different servers, different. So actually, we had to overhaul all of them. So it wasn't, we
Wow.
didn't even keep like a core system necessarily. A lot of stuff was outdated. And so we just made the decision to overhaul everything at once and get everybody on all the same website servers, all the same websites, rebrand everything, a new case management system. I mean, we took it down to the studs and redid it from the ground up, starting at the very beginning.
That's obviously, I guess, still going on, right? That sounds like a huge undertaking.
Yeah, we have been very, very lucky that we have most of our big projects done. So we overhauled our case management system. We got a new accounts payable system. We're working on an HRIS system right now. That's kind of our last big project. We redid all of our, in 4 months, redid all of our websites, did a full rebrand on the company. We did it quick. But yeah, we're working on our HRIS system now. We have a holistic system, but we want it upgraded.
Do you run into a lot of walls at the property level? Because I
Mhm.
know that sometimes the transition can be difficult in and of itself.
Yes.
And then, oh, we're here to not change everything. We're not here to change anything except everything.
Except we have to change everything, right? To make sure that we're we're functioning. Yes, and I knew it was going to be tough because we have all different kinds of locations, right? I mean, I have locations that do 5 or 600 calls a year, and I have locations that do, 4 or 5 calls a month. So we've got a big spread in 11 states. So I knew that we were going to come up against some challenges. So my goal was to engage the field in as much of what we were doing as we could. So one of the first things I did was I started a funeral director committee and I started a pre-need committee so that the field had peer voices in what
Oh,
was going on.
that's great.
Um, and that has been great. They've been able to give feedback and they've been able to, as new policies and procedures have rolled out, they get to take a crack at it. And a lot of times they're presenting things to me that they think would be beneficial for the whole group. So we started there. And then I have always been really big on, making sure that kind of the hardest thing is adult learners have a hard time changing the way they do things, just period, right? Like we
Right.
all do. So making sure we hit the way everybody would learn and take the information. So we did as much as we could training in person. Then we would have things on video for people to review. We would do FAQs that we consistently add to, and then we also would do some sort of manual that would go with it. So if you were somebody who likes to print and read, if you were somebody that likes to watch it, if you're somebody that likes to be a doer, the other thing we did that was really helpful and successful is we kind of picked super users in all of our markets,
Mhm.
trained them first, and then the field had a peer they could go to if they needed help. So we did that in all of our different sectors. And then we have something called Training Tuesdays, where every Tuesday at 2:00, we do some sort of training. And typically, we'll go back through and review what we've launched. So like, let's say, there's something new that came out in our TMS system, or something new happening with the websites, or we just want to do a review to make sure everybody's kind of up and running and feeling good about it. And the whole company is invited to that every Tuesday. We tape those and we keep those, and they're all dated and labeled, and any of the things that we would send out after, like if there was a worksheet that went with it, or something that they could give the families, that gets filed there as well. So even when new hires come on, there's a library of everything we've launched and anything they would need to learn. So we keep that there too. So when people come and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," one of the peer mentors will kind of pop into that library, pull out what they need, and people have their resources at their fingertips. So that's how we went about it. I mean, I'm not saying there weren't bumps in the roads. I'm not saying there weren't people who struggled with the change, but I think telling the why, explaining how it was going to help the families and the employee. Because at the end of the day, once we get all of this done, their lives are a lot easier.
Right.
But it's getting through I always said, we got to get through the muck to kind of get on the other side so we can, ride the wave instead of getting hit by it.
One of the things that was interesting about you that I wanted to ask you is you're not like a funeral director person. You came you were at, I don't know when they changed. Were you at Everstory? Were you at Stonewall?
I was at both. Yeah.
All right.
I was there for a long time. I came on the end of 2016 to Stonewall, and then I was with them all the way through the Everstory change and left in 2024.
So you did the marketing. That was part of that marketing.
Yeah, I sure did.
Because you were the vice president of marketing?
I was the senior vice president of sales, marketing, and training.
Right. What was the attraction in Deathcare? Why jump over? You were in senior living?
I was in senior living. Yeah. So I was in senior living, and I worked I started in senior living in the largest company in the world at the time. I was at Brookdale, and I was very lucky to learn there. And then I ended up doing a couple other things. I was working in investor relations and with another senior living company. And then I went down and did a startup, which I realized was not my, gig. And when I was kind of coming out of that is when I got the call for Stonewall. I just thought it can't be that much different, right? We're serving families. We're serving families at kind of the worst time in their life, which was really what we were doing in senior living. I mean, we were, you were helping families that were making a decision they didn't want to make. I always say I have a knack for selling things nobody wants to talk about, and I think that's why. So I came into Stonewall as their head of marketing, and I think in like 11 months, I'd taken over sales. And then right after that, I took over training and public relations and just really fell in love with it. I don't know. I just love the idea of being able to give a voice to somebody who doesn't have it and helping the families with that. And so I just fell in love with it. And then I left for just a little bit and thought I was going to kind of step out. When I came out of the Stonewall Everstory, I mean, I was pretty burnt out. I'd worked really hard for a really long time, but then I got the call about this opportunity, and I thought, what a great thing to step back into.
What was the learning curve going from operations to marketing? Because I mean, all right, so now we're going to talk about it like a little difficult thing that you had to deal with. So that was one thing. But
yeah.
But what were some of the things you had to learn? As far as operationally, was there anything you were concerned about coming in that turned out not to be a thing, or not concerned about that turned out to be an issue? Anything like that?
So, I mean, I will say I've been so lucky that my entire career, even when I was on the sales and marketing side, I had an excellent operating partner. Even though I didn't love operations back then, I knew I needed to understand it. So I really kind of dove into understanding both sides. And so I always knew I was going to need to take an operations role to really round out what I was doing. So I feel like I prepped for it for a long time, because I will say budgets and labor models and things, that's not my favorite.
Right.
I like the marketing side, the sales side, the outreach side, but I think I was ready for it. Coming into this company, we kind of had a clean slate, and I've been very lucky that we have a fantastic CFO and a fantastic SVP of finance who this is what they love to do, right? He loves to do the budgets and the labor models. So we work very well together. He likes to do the behind the scenes stuff and I like to roll that stuff out to the field. So we work really well together. And I think I was ready. I will tell you, when I came into Deathcare, I would not have been, with all my experience prior in senior living, I would not have been ready to walk into an operations position until I did what I did. So I'm really glad I took the path I did, because I learned so much at Stonemore and Everstory, meeting everybody, being in 28 states in Puerto Rico. Like, I just had such a breadth of people around me that taught
Mm.
me so much that now I feel like I have the ability to do it and do it well. But I will still say, I mean, I'm not a funeral director. And I see that all the time. Like, I have to depend on my team who has done it to really be my gut check. Because I always say I can sit in Philadelphia and come up with amazing ideas, but I've sat and watched it, but I've never been the one to sit with the family
Mm.
and do that myself, because I'm not a funeral director. So I always say, like, I yield to the expert, and they're the expert and I'm the executor.
Also, it seems like the right person at the right time, because you did have to convince everybody to get on board with this project, and
Yeah.
you had to be open to creative solutions for
Mhm.
getting that done.
100%. I mean, you can't do anything. I learned a long time ago, your influence is only as good as the people who are willing to listen to you. So it's really, it was really important to me. And I did the same thing at Everstory when I went in. I mean, I went out in the field immediately and met as many people as I could face to face, right? I
Mm.
wanted people to um, meet me, to kind of understand where I was and just know me as a person. Because the one thing about this industry is the word corporate has a bad connotation. And when I came here and Lisa brought me here, our CEO, I said to her, instead of hiding the fact that we're a corporation, why don't we just be a really good one? Why don't we not be afraid of who we are? Because being a corporation provides a lot of resources for these locations. So that was kind of my message. Like, I don't want to pretend we're not a corporation, but I want to be a good one. I don't want to be the one that messes up the local funeral home. So yeah, I just wanted to get out and meet everybody. And I was really big on, if we had folks that were struggling, if we had folks that didn't agree, I would just tell my regional directors, set up a time. I'll jump on a Teams call with them. We'll get face to face. We'll have transparent conversations and see where we get with it. And I made sure I did that every single time. So I think that went a long way with the field and kind of developing that trust. And then once you have that trust, at least on a surface level, you can start to make change.
Along those lines, this idea of being a little bit more transparent, it's always interesting
Mhm.
when you go to a funeral home and you're like, okay, as soon as you go to the funeral director's page, and I know I'm the only one who does this 10 or 15 times a day anyway,
Right.
but you look and you see operations manager and you're like, okay, what company owns it?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But that transparency is also kind of a way of making your pitch to potential owners about, being behind the name and trying to keep the
Yeah.
same culture.
Yep.
And in the case of Oak Grove, where you came in the middle, um,
Mhm.
I have two kind of questions, but I wanted to contextualize it. So the
Sure.
the the first question is, it's a lot of it's a lot of money to dump into a funeral. Like,
It is.
mostly what I write about is how nobody can afford to open a funeral home anywhere, and then you come in and you move a funeral home and then
Yeah.
redo it. So what made that? I mean, the math must have worked out. You were just praising your CFO, but
Yes. Yeah.
what was the thinking behind the whole refurbishment, or as you understood it? I know you came late.
Yeah. What I understood was, and I don't know if it had to do with like a lease ending or, I really don't.
Mhm.
I don't know the whole backstory there, but I know that they wanted more space. So they moved it to this building. I mean, it's a beautiful building. It's in a great area in Collierville. So that's what I understand. My guess is there was something, it was either going to be a re-up of the lease or they were going to
Mm.
have to move. And that's why they made the decision. That's just my guess though.
Right.
I'm not really sure why else you would do that at that point, but when I got here, they were moved in, settled, and kind of rocking and rolling already. It was just, what do we do with the name? Because once I, got us on a digital marketing platform, that was the one it was the one that stood out above everyone. We were really having trouble getting the right traffic to that location's website. And I just was afraid we were going to start losing market share because of it. So,
Yeah, and this is where it got a little uncomfortable. So,
right.
as I understand the story, the former owner was also a state senator
Yes.
and politically interesting, and he was putting the company in a position after he left that, and that doesn't happen very often, but it must happen occasionally, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yes. I think it's happened before. I think a lot of times you'll see former owners that go into some sort of political landscape because they're used to being the people in the town that everyone knows. He got himself to a state senator level, and honestly, there would not have been a connection if his name wasn't on the building, right?
Right.
So there wasn't a connection to any of the other funeral homes he used to own. It was just his name was on the building. So when you Google his name, you're going to get, his personal or political, what he's doing professionally now. And so for us, that's not, regardless of his stances, that's not great for us because, you're having to kind of siphon through all of those things to get to our business. And so I needed to figure out a way to get us to our business and not to, his pages for his political stuff.
And I guess that's a really interesting problem, and this is more philosophical than anything else. But when we talk about things like non-competes, you never think of non-competing digitally. But
Right.
I guess that's the next step. Like,
That
not
is.
only can you open up another funeral home,
Yep.
but you can say, "Hey, I'm a funeral director, and this is what I." Well, I guess that would be the problem, right? When your funeral director persona remains, even though you don't
Yes.
own the building. Yeah,
Yes, and in his case, his funeral director persona didn't even remain. It was just connected through his actual name.
that's
He wasn't putting it out there that he was still a funeral director. I think that the digital space is going to be something that the industry is really going to have to think about because there's a lot to that when you have people's names on buildings and you're thinking about how you're going to reach families the way they want to be reached at this point, which is digitally.
Yeah, and I write, I don't know, twice a month. I write to that funeral directors and COOs and CEOs. So thank you for coming on. Have to do a better job of being the face of their business. But if you make this huge play to be the face of your business, when you sell it, especially if you sell it and don't retire, that
Yes.
that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, and that's going to happen more and more because
Yeah.
if you think about it, what we're seeing now is the children in the family-owned businesses are not wanting to stay in the business. So these folks, these owners have built up an incredible reputation. And a lot of them, when they're ready to get out of the funeral business, they're going on school boards. They're, maybe going into politics. A lot of them go and be pastors at churches, and they sell. And
Mm.
I think that's gonna happen a lot. And the industry is just gonna have to think about how do you keep that location local, but I don't know that you'll always be able to use the family name. I think it's case by case, but yeah. It's an interesting thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of.
And so in this particular situation,
Mhm.
there were threats. Can you please continue the story from where I left off, where there were some online problems that came to your
Right. Yeah, there were some things that came up that the community made us aware that they were uncomfortable with. And so we wanted to address that. Really, the purpose was to make a statement to say, political affiliation, it doesn't matter. We serve everyone in the community. And so we felt like it was really important to make sure that was known. And in that statement, I mentioned that we were in the middle of a rebrand, which we were. We were working through the rebrand. And so we kind of just let the community know that was coming and move forward with it and then completed it. And that's kind of what you're seeing now is we did the grand reopening with the Chamber of Commerce. It was super successful. We did some drives for local businesses around there and just want to reestablish ourselves. The staff's the same. everything's the same. New name, easier to find,
Mm.
and just really want the community to know that no matter what, we serve everybody.
Once again, along those lines, the question of when you decide to make, when you decide to make a decision, when you end up making a decision like this,
Yes.
um, how much of that is built into because it must be something in the contract that says for how long you intend to keep a name on or reasons that you would change the name. Is that built into the deal? And I know you don't know about this deal. I just broadly.
So I think it depends, right? It all depends on the group that sold and what their intentions were afterwards. So I think it's case by case. I think it's definitely something moving forward we will talk about, right? That we'll want to make sure that that's very clear because I think it's something that people just didn't even think about before because you just kept the name or you didn't, right?
Right.
You either kept the name or it became a corporate entity and it changed. So I think in these cases, we've got to think about that moving forward in new acquisitions. How do we want to talk about that? What does that look like? And making sure it's very clear.
And what do you think is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from this and from, I guess, any of the other? Because you've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
How many funeral homes have you acquired since you came on?
So we have not.
All right.
We knew we weren't in acquisition mode yet when I got here. The only thing that we have done is we had 3 small cemeteries that we divested.
Mhm.
Because those are all the cemeteries we had. So we really wanted to focus on just our core business, which is funeral homes. So no, we haven't been back in acquisition mode yet, but soon, hopefully.
That's interesting. And is that just finding the right fits? Because everybody else can't stop sending me press releases about how many funeral homes they just bought.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that we really wanted to think about. I mean, I'm a huge proponent that if you're going to acquire, you need to have the core business to acquire into. So your core business needs to be running really strong so that when you acquire a group, it's pretty seamless to bring them onto your systems.
Ah, yeah.
Um, so we had to fix that, and I think we're getting really close to that. But I think that's really something we had to consider. The other thing we've been talking a lot about is just this idea that more and more real estate is not necessarily the way it's going to end up going in the industry. And do you want to keep buying real estate? Are there people that want to sell their business without the real estate and sell the real estate for something else? I just believe in the next decade, we're going to see less and less traditional funeral homes. So there's just, I think, a lot to think about on the business side before we make those decisions. And those will be big decisions for us because once we get the core business up and running really, really well, it'll just be important that we make really smart acquisitions.
I'm going to say that's brilliant, but I'm really just complimenting myself because I haven't shut up about that for the last 6 months.
Yes, it's
Um,
definitely, yeah, it's definitely changing.
and I can easily imagine something that looks a little bit more British with more storefronts. And
Mhm.
either you're going to have these celebrations of life centers or
Yep.
storefronts, or that I don't know how much longer there will be funeral homes. And especially as you were saying with real estate as it is, the appetite to take on these big real estate
Yeah.
debts for a industry that, has margin concerns
Mhm.
is something that's unsustainable.
Right. I mean, I think, a couple of things. I don't know if you saw, but we just launched our Willow Cremation
Mm,
Services,
yeah.
which is our online. We took our cremation societies and, changed those to be like a true, easy online experience for the families. And the idea there is that we're able to scale that at some point and put those in place in our, different markets. The one thing that we're really lucky about at this company is when they purchased in almost clusters. So the bulk of our businesses are in clusters
Oh,
and they're able to share labor and we're able to do a lot of different things because of that, that kind of shared model services, which a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to do that because they're so spread out. So it fits really well with being able to ebb and flow with the high and low seasons and make sure people, still have hours and but also being able to have that cremation, the Willow Cremation Services in a place that maybe you have high-end funeral homes and we just were losing that market share to a storefront down the street that somebody
mm,
was running. I mean, why do that when you can keep it in the family? I just think I've always said that this industry will end up being retorts attached to event centers if we don't figure it out as an industry that what we're doing right now is not what people want.
Right. Well, and that is all I have for you, unless you have something else for me. Is there something I should have asked and didn't, or something you thought you'd get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide it?
No, I mean, I think we got to cover everything.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
I told you it would be a great show, and I think I lived up to it. Just really quick on the Brent Taylor shenanigans. I actually reported on him back. I feel like it was in the spring. I forgot to look it up because it was in the podcast. It wasn't on the newsletter part, but he got into a fight with like the county sheriff, and it was just pathetic. I mean, I've never been a big fan of politicians generally, state politicians specifically. I think the closer you get to the ground level, the more a lot of these people look like kids at a dress-up game for grown-ups, a dress-up day for grown-ups, like Tea Party. I go to a county commissioners meeting, I just see children in great big floppy hats pretending like they're grown-up adult decision makers. I never expected it to make it all the way into American politics, but I mean, what are you going to do? What I'm really interested, though, is in the bigger question about how to manage your own social media profile, whether you're looking at buying a funeral home that has a active social media presence that you may not necessarily control, especially if it's in the name of the owner, or if you're an owner, how much do you consider your social media presence an asset? I've put out a little bit about this already, but this is my official ask. I would love it if you reached out to me on this subject. You can email me at bytonyrusso@gmail.com. That is bytonyrusso@gmail.com. And of course, you can just respond to the email that this came in, or you can make a comment below the show note posting. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you are on YouTube, we have a YouTube page. It's on Deathcare. If you are on Instagram, we have an Instagram page. Guess what it is? Yes, it is on Deathcare. And finally, you can go to ondeathcare.com to subscribe to everything, and then I will send it to you, and you won't have to count on remembering how much you missed my voice. I will remind you at least once a week how much you missed my voice. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me. I know, as I always say, that your time is valuable, and it is as valuable to me as it is to you. And I really want to make your time here worthwhile. So I hope I have, and I will try again next time. And that is when I will see you.